All right, so this is one of those videos where you'll have to watch it all the way through in order to get the entire point. Because if you cut this off in the middle, then you're going to get a very inaccurate summation of what I'm trying to say. You'll inaccurately believe that I'm trying to downplay the threat of the coronavirus, when really what I'm trying to point out here, as Dan Bongino says so perfectly, is we're not questioning whether or not the coronavirus is a threat. We're looking at the data and asking the question, how much of a threat is it? And the Democrats, they're up to their usual tactics of providing deceptive and false information in order to overhype the threat beyond the level of threat that it actually is, in order to justify actions being taken. And we'll explain why they're trying to justify the actions being taken later on in this video. But if we actually go through the data and we go through with what they're reporting, then we have to start asking the question, why are they being so deceptive about the information? Why are they trying to mislead us? And when we go through and take a look at a couple of bits of information here, we're going to expose the deception. Now, again, this is not about if coronavirus is a threat. It's about how much is it. You know, is it a 5% death rate? Is it a 2% death rate? Is it less than 2%? We don't know, and that is the point of this video. Nobody actually knows. But here's how the media is trying to spin it on the left. So we're going to go with MSNBC's Rachel Maddow and her giving out blatantly deceptive information. Of course, this is par for the course for Rachel Maddow, who no one can actually take as a serious source of information, right? Her segments have been debunked repeatedly. So here's how she's trying to spin it, and then we'll go through and tell you the truth.
So as you can see, by late January, China was dealing with an explosive outbreak. But even as that country started to grapple with tens of thousands of cases, the rest of the world remained largely unscathed. By late February, however, there's South Korea, there's Italy, there's Iran, all reporting thousands of cases. And now here, watch what happens at the beginning of March. Look at the speed at which the U.S. epidemic starts to take off. By the end of March, we have surpassed everyone. And from that point on, cases in the U.S. continue to grow with astonishing speed by the thousands and then by the tens of thousands, and nobody is even close. That is the proof in the pudding. That is the data that shows a failed national response, the worst failed national response on earth.
Okay, so yes, that is the proof in the pudding, sorry. Except that it's not. Here's what she's not telling you. Population size. See, she's not giving you a per thousand ratio. She's not trying to give you an apples to apples comparison. Why? Well, if you actually study the data, you would realize that the United States has the third largest population in the world. And the countries that she's trying to compare us to as evident that we had the worst response don't even have the population size, or barely matches the population size of New York, or don't even have the population size of California. They only have a fraction of the population size. So if we were to go through and take a look at the actual data, then you can go through and say they tested 100% of their population, these other countries, and 100% of their population tested positive for coronavirus. They would still have less confirmed coronavirus cases than the United States, because they don't have the population size to even come close to matching the number of confirmed cases possible in the United States. A lot of them can't even match just New York alone. So when you don't adjust for population size and you're trying to compare us to countries that have a fraction of the population, that is very deceptive. Now, the only two countries with a larger population size than the United States is India and China. And you can't trust anything coming out of China. In fact, there's a lot of indication that they're not even really doing testing. And India, there's not really a whole lot of testing going on there. So when you have the third largest population and the most testing in the world, of course you're going to have more confirmed cases. Right? So that is the complete deception that she is trying to pull there, hoping that you don't look at the data. And for those of us who are saying, hey, there's something wrong with the data here, well, they have a response for that, which is they conducted a poll that they are now spinning as showing that those who consume conservative-only media diets are twice as ignorant about the threat of the coronavirus and are science deniers. Only the science doesn't actually back up their claim. Why? Because we don't have the science on this yet. The data is fundamentally flawed, and we're going to analyze that, but they don't want you to analyze the data. So let's take a look at how the Young Turks propaganda outlet is trying to spin this report, and then let's take a look at what the report actually says.
New study out from Knight Foundation Gallup poll showing Fox News audience and conservative media audience in general more ignorant than the average American. Of course. So this is not remotely surprising. I could already hear the Fox News host crying, "Oh, fake news, whatever." No, they poll people and they ask them simple questions. It's not they're ignorant as in they're pro-life and we don't like that position. No, it's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of facts. So now first, the part of the poll that is not at all surprising, media, as I've been telling you, is everything. So if you watch Fox News, you believe insane things like that Donald Trump is a competent person.
Okay. Now, first of all, it's great that he admits that his views on abortion is just an opinion and not science. It's finally nice to see him admit that. But the data that he is reporting to claim that conservative media only news diets are twice as ignorant as liberals, that's not what it actually says. And so the point here is that it asks 3 questions, and they are open-ended questions, granted. And so question number 1 was just an open question. Do you believe the coronavirus was less deadly, as deadly, or more deadly than the flu? And that was the question. But when they report question 1, they combined as deadly and less deadly than the flu together. I wonder why they didn't break it down, more, and why they didn't, really give us, the real detailed information. Because if 1% said less deadly, well, that would make sense, right? Because 1%, whereas 56% said at least as deadly. Now, to say that it's more deadly than the flu, we don't actually have that data. But remember, he wants to go off and say it's a denial of science, to question it. Now, if you want to ask me my personal opinion, yes, I believe it's more deadly than the flu. I just don't know how much more deadly. And here gets into the claim that, it's science, when the science doesn't actually back it up, because the science is inconclusive. Why? Well, as the liberal media would point out, there was a lack of testing when this first broke out in the United States. And until we get to the point where we can test for antibodies, we don't know how many people have actually been infected. The death rates right now are calculated only on confirmed cases, meaning those who had some symptoms severe enough to actually go out and get tested. And the number of deaths is not necessarily deaths from coronavirus, but people who died and happened to have coronavirus. So the data that we're getting is blatantly, misleading, false, inaccurate. So we don't actually know what it is. So we know that we don't have the total impression of who was all infected. So if, for instance, 5 times the number of confirmed cases of people have actually been infected, well, that brings down the death rate rather significantly, right? Now, it could also be possible that people have died from coronavirus and they're not included in the death count because of the lack of testing when it happened. Granted. So the death rate could be higher, could be lower. We don't know. But when it comes to the actual deaths from coronavirus of confirmed cases, we don't have accurate information on that as well. And anybody who's been studying the data started noticing that, there's something going on in New York, because California has a much larger population than New York. And yet they have a fraction of the deaths. In fact, the number of deaths in California from confirmed cases is still under 500, at least at the time of this recording. So you start wondering, well, why is it New York, with a smaller population than California, is experiencing higher deaths? So we start taking a look at how the deaths are being reported. And we find out that, hey, anybody who dies for any reason that tests positive for coronavirus is being included in the death statistics of coronavirus, which is blatantly misleading and false. And now they're going to give us even less accurate information, as Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York City, says he will include suspected coronavirus patients and death tolls without testing. So now, not only are they including people that died for any reason in the deaths statistics of coronavirus, but now they're not even going to test whether or not the people being included actually had coronavirus. And so the way this is all being reported seems to be done to be intentionally misleading and give us intentionally inaccurate information. And to highlight this a little bit further, I pulled this information from the New York Department of Health. And so we go through and we take a look at what their average deaths are in New York from non-murder related reasons. And the top 5 is heart disease, cancer, unintentional injuries, CLRD, and stroke, for a total of 153,684 deaths a year, which, if you average that out over the course of the year, is 12,000 deaths, right? Now, think about that for a moment. That's 12,000 deaths. There have been less reported deaths from coronavirus. So, for instance, if a person actually dies of heart disease or a stroke, but they test the person and found out that they had coronavirus, even if they were still asymptomatic, which means they still weren't showing any symptoms of it, they would still include that person who died from stroke into the data of coronavirus. So if we look at the data here and we see that if the average amount of deaths from these 5 causes equals about 12,000, and then we take a look at last month's information, and we see that the amount of deaths from these causes, or the combined amount of deaths from these 5 top causes, decreased somewhere in the proximity of the amount of people who have died of the coronavirus, well, then we know that the information we're getting is horribly inaccurate. But the Democrats, they don't want you looking at the data. They want to declare how dangerous this is, have you not question it, and then go out, ridicule, and demonize anybody who is looking at the data. But why would they do that? Why would they go off and try and claim that this is as deadly as 5% or 6%? Now, look, there are areas where it's showing to be more deadly than it is in other areas. So there's a lot of factors about how coronavirus affects people that we just do not know. But as they go through and they talk about how deadly this is, they're going through to set the narrative because they want you to believe that this is going to go on for a long time, such as what they're saying in this clip.
No one is immune to the COVID-19 virus. It threatens all of us. But while we are all experiencing the same pandemic, we are not experiencing it in the same way. 60 million Americans are still out there, not sheltering in place, and instead tirelessly working to keep everything going for the rest of us. And then there are the tens of millions of Americans who have lost jobs and businesses, or who fear that they're just about to, Realistically, COVID-19 will be here for the next 18 months or more. We will not be able to return to normalcy until we find a vaccine or effective medications. I know that's dreadful news to hear. How are people supposed to find work if this goes on in some form for a year and a half? Is all that economic pain worth trying to stop COVID-19? The truth is, we have no choice.
That's right. The truth is, we have no choice because this is so deadly. But what if it's not as deadly as what they're saying? Then we do have more choices on how to respond. So why is it they want to set the narrative that we have no choice because this is so deadly? Well, it's because if you take a look at this, you see that they are practicing the famous motto set by Rahm Emanuel of the Democrat Party, which is never let a crisis go to waste. And as we see from our response to this, based off of the perceived level of threat, the Democrats are out there making massive plays for power that they hope to be able to retain, or in large part be able to retain after the crisis is over. And the longer the crisis lasts, based off of the justification of how deadly this is, the more power that they can grab and justify on the basis of trying to prevent the threat of the coronavirus. It also, by keeping the economy down for as long as possible, that gives them more time to get used to the idea, or get people used to the idea of being dependent upon government money, that the government can afford something like universal basic income, or for free health care, right? Single payer health care. The more this drags on and the more financial pain they can put people in, the more they can get them used to government money and the government check. Therefore, when all this is over, they don't want to give it up. And the Democrats are able to institute their socialist utopia while making massive plays for power, that most of which they hope to never have to surrender when this is over. So maybe we start seeing why it is that they are continually desperate to inflate the data, to inflate the number of deaths by whatever means possible to up the death rate from the coronavirus. Why they're not interested in trying to figure out just how many people have actually been infected by the coronavirus. Any information that lowers the death rate, no matter what, they got to stop. And they got to make sure you're not asking that question. Is it the same as the flu? Is it just a little more than the flu at 1%, 2%, 5%, or 10%? The point is, we don't know. But trying to give us purposely deceptive information and then going out there and demonizing anybody who questions it only highlights the importance of needing to get the information we don't know so that we can make more informed decisions. And demonizing people for wanting to have more informed decision is not something that is based on science or science denial, as the left wants to claim. It's not about a denial of science. It's about the promotion of science, because in the end, science is about truth and understanding, something the Democrats want nothing of.